Welcome to Climate Courage. My name's Andrea Edwards.
And my name is Steve Johnson.
And for those of you who don't know, Steve Johnson is my husband, you lucky thing.
Indeed. I like that word lucky. It covers so much.
Yeah, but for those of you who do know us, just yesterday we got the great news that Steve's been given the all clear from his surgeon, and that's 3 months to the day, basically, since your major surgery that we all had to go through. You poor thing, it was horrible. How did that make you feel?
Oh, an awful lot better than what I was feeling 3 months ago, I must be honest. Yeah, I mean, it was a weird day yesterday. It was something that I think we've both been looking forward to for so long. But then with it comes like a realization. I now have to walk around with what looks like a massive zipper on the front of my stomach. The boys found it entertaining last night. They are drawing up all kinds of tattoos. Apparently, I'm going to get. And they also noticed that it looks like I now have a bottom on my stomach as well because of the way the scarring's happened. So, yeah, happy day, mixed feelings, and yeah, not the best 3 months I think we've had together. I'm sure you'd agree, my love.
No, certainly didn't help my dooms sort of state of mind, right?
Gave you plenty of time to read some stuff while I wasn't jabbering in your ear, that's for certain.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, I asked Steve to come and join me today. So the original idea was I was just going to sort of do it myself. I started the first Climate Courage, I don't know, 6-7 months ago. It's hard work doing these, but I actually don't enjoy doing them by myself. And I thought it would be really interesting to get the perspective of my partner in life who basically sees it all and experiences it all. He doesn't necessarily invest the time that I invest in because one of us needs to be out there functioning in the world while the other one's sort of going deep on this stuff. So I thought it'd be interesting just to get the perspective of a couple who are fully facing up to what's going on in the environment on all the different levels, and what that experience looks like. And so therefore Steve's going to be the one who's interviewing me today. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yep. For once, I actually get to ask the questions, and I actually get a word in edgeways. We've discussed this. I'll just add a little bit more colour to that before I get into the questions. But anyone who knows Andrea knows she has an intense passion for researching things, and when she gets into it, it's like a dog with a bone. And so I have watched you do this over a number of years, and we've discussed it many times, various states of inebriation. Usually we get our most results between 2 and 4 a.m. Some nights, but I remember one night a few weeks ago we were, I think, in a state of inebriation. We said, you know what, we should share this, we should talk about this like as a couple. So we thought we'd give it a go without the alcohol. So just a disclaimer, that is actually green tea. It's not beer or anything like that. But I don't need to look into things. I don't need to research things because you do such a good job. But I see so many people now people personally or business related are asking you your opinion on things. And you're saying, well, this is the research that I'm seeing. And then people go, oh, but that's really bad news. And then they'll kind of like sort of forget about it, hoping it will kind of go away. But the reality of it is that might not be the case, unless we all get our finger out and do something about it. So in an attempt to try and set that scene, we've been together 20 years this year. And as the old gag goes, you do get less for murder. However, within that 20 years, before that 20 years, I know that this was a topic, the concept of climate change and security, et cetera, was a topic that was very close to your heart and existed way before we met. But for other folks, I was trying to think of a way that we could sort of set the scene. So for the time we've been together 20 years, if we imagine that somebody had just woken up after a 20-year coma, and they're walking to their favorite place and they're noticing it's hotter, or the river they used to fish in, they can't fish in anymore because it's full of crap. For those people, and I'm sure there's many of them out there that have just awoken from a 20-year coma, that will be walking around going, how the hell did this happen in the last 20 years? What would be your response to those people?
I mean, can you even imagine it? I love this question because it really makes you think back and reflect where we were 20 years ago, right? And you said, I've been paying attention to this longer before we met. As an Australian, we grew up with the ozone hole. So Australians were very switched on to what was going on in the environment long before everybody else, because we were already being directly impacted by it. But 20 years ago, I think of Singapore, the city I arrived in compared to the city that's there today, just the amount of change that's happened there is mind-blowing. But it's also that period which was just post the dot-com crash, which basically saw me having to leave Boston. I went to Australia for a year, and then I ended up in Singapore, where we met 4 months later. Yay. The technology at the time, the messenger type of software platforms had just started to kick off, and portals, so information portals, were a really big thing. I was doing a lot of work around that area. But it was also a while before the internet media and social media really kicked off. That really started to happen in 2008, when Facebook came out and was very much the dominant social media platform, and everyone started piling onto it. But then you move to now and sort of the last decade, and we've watched what that's meant, which has been massive societal impact. It's like our democracies are under siege, conspiracy theories are off the chart, fake news, propaganda, the rise of authoritarianism. I mean, we're looking at stuff that none of us expected to see in our life. That was all supposed to happen. That was in the past, that we weren't going to do that again. And here we are in the middle of it again. So, social media is not all bad. If we give up on social media, we are giving up the democratization of information. And that's something that I think is really important, because when you give that up, you give it back into the hands of a few people, a few powerful people. And you look at some of the powerful people that we see around the world today, Musk and Twitter, that's not necessarily a thing that we want to be giving up. So I've always sort of said we've got to embrace what's good about social media. Its potential, the good of its potential is so good. I will always fight for it. But at the same time, we've got to fight the social media companies to change their ways. It's like they've got no imagination of how they can possibly do this in a different way. I remember at the beginning, they were all looking at subscription models, and no one was willing to pay for it. I'd be very much willing to pay for any social media platform today, and I'd be willing to pay for people who aren't incapable of paying for social media platforms, so that we can get rid of some of the negative sides of it. So, but the profit thing, I mean, just in the last week, Google's been called out for sharing disinformation through its platform, sort of pushing people from videos to go to disinformation videos on climate change. So, they're making money from this disinformation. But the other part that I think that we've really got to get on top of course, is the AI revolution. So the very same companies who have created all of this chaos around the world through the social media platforms haven't cleaned up their act, and yet they're leading us into this new revolution, which is the implications of this are so huge. And of course, what's brilliant is absolutely brilliant, but what's bad is really, really, really bad. And some of the people who created AI, some of the original founders, they're sending out the alarms, and we've got to pay attention to it, because, how can we possibly trust the same institutions who still haven't solved the original problem, which has created so much damage? You going to say something?
It's almost like we need a social media international compliance police. I'm thinking a slightly more sophisticated version of Team America or something like that.
Oh, don't! That's songs in my head now.
And a little bit more PC. But yeah, it's kind of like the fox in charge of the hen house in some ways, right? And especially, I mean, Elon Musk, love him or hate him, you have a responsibility, you have a duty of care if you're in a position like that. As he found out when he was struck off being chair of his own company for making those comments about buying shares back, which instantly elevated the share value. But yeah, it's almost like there is no compliance.
No, and I don't think governments are capable of doing it. You watch the congressional sort of meetings when they're talking about social media, and there's these old white men typically sitting there going, Well, when you're on Twitter and you do this, they don't even know how to use the technology themselves. So how could they possibly understand social media within the context of our boys' generation, who they've never not known it? So the work has to come from within the industry with, better ethics and. We have to get on top of this. We have to get on top of this. But of course, if you think about, but this whole AI thing, to me the other night, I started laughing. It's so crazy where we're going. But then you think about politics. In the last 20 years, America had its first black president, and then after that, they had Donald Trump. And 20 years ago, you probably were watching The Apprentice, and then you woke up and he's the president of the United States. That would be a bit of a mind blowing. And then you go across the not the channel, the ocean between the Atlantic, right? And Britain voted Brexit, and my fury of that is still what they've done is they've taken away an option for my children to be able to move. That's the biggest crime of Brexit. Older people making that decision, impacting the younger generation, because we all need to be able to move in the future, because that's what's coming at us. But the big thing, the really, really, really big thing that's happened in the last 20 years is China and the middle class revolution. That's what's happened. So let me just show you a chart, and I'm sharing charts for the first time. This is world population growth, and sort of once you get to a point, growth is exponential. So, look at that. So there's a lot of people saying this is the children born today will be the last humans born, and they're expecting, the population to really dramatically start to reduce. All the poisons and the chemicals and everything in our environment are making men less fertile. So, but this is another hockey stick graph, and I'll show you a few more. But I want to give some context around the middle class boom, and I don't hear enough conversation around this. I'm not one of these people that talks about population the way a lot of people do. I don't believe population is the issue. It's how populations spend their money that's the issue. So it's how we consume, right? So in 2001, there were 398 million middle-class people in the world. By 2011, there were 783 million middle-class people in the world. And much of that increase was from China alone, 203 million, right? Today, it's estimated that we have 3.8 billion people in the middle class, or 48% of the world's population. So China's got the largest with 225 million households, and the Asia region accounts for over 40% of the middle class of the world today. By 2030, 66% of all middle class will live in Asia, and their collective spending power will go from $35 trillion today to $64 trillion by 2030. That's 36% of the total GDP worldwide. Now, how this is ever going to happen when we're looking at the escalation of the climate emergency, that those people will maintain this or that growth will happen, is beyond me. But anyway, that's what the numbers are saying. There was some attention being paid to this back at the beginning of the last decade. So in 2013, the World Economic Forum, I've quoted this many, many times, estimated the middle class then would boom from 500 million, which is a little bit lower than the other number that I shared, to 1.75 billion by 2020. It was considered the greatest seismic shift in human history, and there were a lot of people paying attention to it. But we've seen double that growth, and all of that growth was on the back of fossil fuels. So, if the predicted growth to $64 trillion happens on the back of fossil fuels, we're pretty much screwed. India is another massive concern, as well as some of the other growing Asia powers. Thailand, where we live, Korea, all those sort of, Indonesia, Malaysia, because they're all growing off the back of the dirtiest fossil fuel, coal. And if they continue to grow and use coal, the escalation we've seen in the last couple of decades is going to be child's play. It's the only conclusion I can come to, right? So to that person waking up today, I'm so sorry. What appears to have happened is that every single government leader, business leader, and economist basically took their eye off the ball. They didn't spend 1 minute considering what growth at this scale would look like. They never considered how 398 million in middle class people in 2001, growing to 783 million middle class in 2011, exploding to 3.8 billion people by 2023 would impact us. I mean, how would it be possible for our Earth to support this number of people that are all wanting things, bigger homes, cars, fridges, meat, seafood, clothes, holidays, flights, consumer goods, And no one ever said, wait a minute, this might not actually be a good idea. We might need to rethink these things. But instead, what happened is advertisers sold a dream worldwide of more. Manufacturing exploded, making
So
more
it's
and more cheaper and cheaper. Sorry, yeah?
yeah, so it's almost like the American dream on
Yeah.
steroids.
Yeah.
So how many times have we seen either legit advertisements from the 50s and the 60s, with old mate, a three-piece suit, smoking a pipe, and he's got his new
Lovely wife
Buick
at
and
home.
he's driving in, and there's Mrs. in a little matching two-piece, a couple of kids, and it's the American dream. Have a house, have a car. But the difference now is that's been elevated so much because there are so many more people that have risen into that middle class, and it's, why not have two houses? Why not have three? If you're in Australia, have as many as you can, because you can negatively gear your tax, and apparently that makes sense. You don't want one car, you want 3, 4, 5 cars. So it's almost like huge consumer, people that have got the cash to spend on consumerism. But it just came to me. It's kind of like that image that we always saw of the American dream. It's almost like the world dream now.
Yeah.
But it's gotten out of control, and it's spiraling, and there's a cost and a price to pay.
In 20 years, 398 million in 2001 to 3.8 billion in 2023. And to me, when it's shocking how no one ever went, wait a minute, like really shocking. I mean, manufacturing's exploded, and I'm not one of these people that blames China for the situation we're in, because China grew by creating cheap stuff that Americans and the rest of the world wanted, right? And now they are now a wealthy nation in their own right, and are also consuming these products. But, the manufacturing, everything got cheaper and cheaper. I remember we bought an LG television, and it didn't even last its warranty, and the sound failed. I remember watching a sale where this guy in America, one of those Black Friday sales or whatever, I'm buying a new TV today. I don't need one, but I can buy one. That sort of mindset. It's like we just throw it all away. And where's the way? We've lost connection with that which sustains us, which is Earth. And
so I remember my mum and dad's first TV. We badgered them, my sister and I, for years to get a new one. It was like, why should we? It's still going. And annoyingly, it was true. That TV that we had, it was a year and a day, and the warranty was a year. A day after the warranty finished, it clapped out, and we got somebody around. They said, oh, yeah, need a new screen, because we live in that disposable economy sort of type environment where it is cheaper. And then when we went to buy a new TV, we got a bigger, better one for a fraction of what we paid for the one before for 12 months, because of that disposable economy and that like massive, and it's all consumer driven.
And it's too expensive to fix the one that's broken. So it's just sitting here, this massive TV. Anyway, so we just lost our way, and trust me, the 0.001%, the billionaires who have individual contributions of emissions the size of nations, they don't get off. But it's this massive growth of people with money to spend, and they're spending it. And that's why we're in the situation we're in, that you've woken into, 20 years later, where the world's hotter. And it's something I think about a lot, and it's something that concerns me a lot. And we need to have a new dream. And it can't be the American dream anymore. It can't be the middle-class American dream or the Australian middle-class dream or the British middle-class dream. We need a new dream, and it's not a dream full of stuff,
Right.
because it's destroying us.
Right. No, we need to get by with less, and let's face it, we can. So it's
Yeah.
not hard. Okay. So moving on into something specific. So I saw a big seismic shift in you last year. And I remember the first no-show that you did with Joe and Tim every other Friday, folks. And the first no-show of the year. And it was just when this, like, the kind of Russia-Ukraine thing, they're kind of standing off, like what's going to happen. And it was strange watching you go through that. And it was actually a little bit disturbing because you have the ability to take on like literally tons and tons of information, some of it horrific, whatever it might be, in a very pragmatic, unemotional, almost cold, calculating kind of manner. But the first quarter last year, there was like a shift in you. Shoulders were down. There was a lot more sighing. And folks who don't know you as well as I do probably didn't notice that, but I mean, it was horrible to watch you looking. It was horrible to watch you because you're always the one that says to me, if I'm like, oh, I'm having a really bad day, you're like, come on. You always find the good in everything and everybody, which is really annoying. And in the past, it has been quite expensive as well, right? But I found the roles reversed, and I'm trying to bring you up, which, being a bit grumpy myself, is kind of like was probably always doomed to fail. So what happened? What was it that happened in the quarter of last year for somebody like you who's got eyes up, looking around at everything, that suddenly went,
Yeah.
Share that with us if you can.
Well, the war for me, the Russia invading or Putin invading Ukraine was just like that. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. It's just, those days need to be so far behind us. We're never not going to see war in the world, but war of that scale with a nuclear power, that was hard. But it was beyond that. Not long after that, we experienced a 30 and 40 degrees C above average temperatures in both of the poles, in Antarctica and the Arctic. And George Monbiot, who's someone I really appreciate, stated at the time that as far as the climate goes, it's just gone nuclear. At the same time, the next two IPCC reports came out, and they were labelled as code red for humanity. And then so many things started to happen. Like, most mind-blowing for me was when the largest body of water ever released on Earth due to a glacial lake outburst in Pakistan happened. And it happened on a Saturday night. And I remember waking up the next day, and it was on the BBC, but it wasn't on the New York Times. It wasn't in the Wall Street Journal, and it wasn't in major media around the world. And I just couldn't believe that it wasn't there.
I remember us looking for it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually think I might have found the first hint of it for once. I might have been first. Yeah. I could be wrong. I probably am.
Yeah. Well, I was finding video on Twitter, and I was like, whoa, what?
Right. No, but I distinctly remember us looking for it. And it's like, BBC, it was kind of like buried deep in their app somewhere. But like the other big news organizations that we've come to know and trust, it's like, it got minimal coverage.
Yeah, that was really shocking. Sorry, people are still talking about it incorrectly, talking about it as extreme monsoonal rains. It's not. And I just want to show you something. So this is quite recent. So you'll be seeing this. It's coming from Maine University. The black line on the top is ocean temperatures are off the charts. And of course, with El Nino coming, the Pacific Ocean is soon going to release a big bulb of heat, which is instantly going to increase global temperatures everywhere around the world. And Pakistan has 33 other glacial lakes at risk. So they've already lost one, and they've got over 3,000 glacial lakes, but they've got 33 others at risk. So we could be seeing more of that in the coming years. So The scientists are extremely concerned about the level of warming that's happening in the oceans right now, especially as we're on the cusp of
Right.
El Nino. We obviously saw the 70-day. Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, going back to that chart, the very last data point looked like it was showing a downward trend in the temperature.
Yeah, but it's just see how much higher it is
Oh yeah,
above average. Yeah,
yep.
it's that,
Okay.
and yeah, if you compare it to
Sorry.
the last El Ninos, it's way above. So we're going to see. They're talking about experiencing 1.5 when El Nino kicks in. So then we're going to
Sorry,
really see.
I got excited there. I thought there was a ray of hope.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry
Yeah.
on.
But last year we also saw the 70-day drought in China, which just buckled the entire supply chain, and I really felt for the Chinese people living in their apartments. Their grids went down because it was too hot, so no air conditioning. They were still in COVID lockdowns then, so that would have been absolutely terrible. Friends and family going through the terrible floods in Australia, Europe and America's droughts, which we're also seeing this year. I personally experienced 4 extreme weather events myself on 3 continents in 2022. And then we moved into 2023. And as we moved into 2023, these atmospheric rivers kept forming over the California coastline. And they've left behind this massive snowpack, which we're just waiting for it to melt, which is expected to also cause more floods. And that's another bread basket for the world. So, the whole threat of famine, global food shortages, inflation, it's just going to keep getting worse. Like, it's not going to get better. And it's really important to understand that it's not going to get better. So if you know that, what can we do? But then, of course, we're looking at what's going on in Spain at the moment. 60% of the country's in drought. We stocked up on olive oil last year because of what was going on in Spain and Portugal with the drought. And then, of course, for us, we've just gone through the worst April heat wave in Asia's history. And as you know, that really did scare me because we started to move into wet bulb temperatures, and they can cook. And people don't know what wet bulb temperatures are yet, but we're there now, and we're gonna see a lot of deaths across Bangladesh, India, Pakistan from wet bulb temperatures. So I suppose, do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, for those folks that don't understand what that really means, I have a feeling there could be some content coming your way soon. Is that correct?
I have written a very expensive, what can we do to get prepared? Because, I think that's where I really want to serve now, is what we can do. But so I suppose to sum up why I've changed, I've always known that this was going to happen faster. And I know you've always struggled with that, but I always knew that no matter what the scientists were telling us, everything was going to happen faster. Sometimes it was because I felt that the data was too conservative based on the reality that we were seeing in the world. Sometimes it's because scientists don't have enough technology to really get the data that they need to get to understand where they are. So more and more, we're getting more and more information now from the scientists as they're getting access to more technology so that they can crunch bigger numbers. So if you're in the technology industry, your biggest priority now is make sure the scientists have got access to technology so they can do the job that they need to do. And then, of course, we've got things like the IPCC reports. A lot of people criticize the IPCC reports. The scientists are very transparent in saying this information has been toned down by governments. The New Zealand government gets involved from a meat industry perspective. We know that all of the oil producing states, OPEC, always tame down language, anything to do with fossil fuels. So we know they're doing it. So when you read an IPCC report, it's always much more conservative than the reality. So right. we've got to be prepared for more. So, there's lots of signals out there, and if you put the whole spectrum, because there's millions of pieces to the story of the climate, and it's not just climate, it's biodiversity loss, extinction, forever chemicals, pollution. I mean, there's so many aspects to it, right? And that's what I've been trying to do, is pull all of these different pieces together and try and make sense of it. And March 2022 for me was the point where we hit escalation. And it's always a day I knew that was going to come. I don't know if it was going to be a day, but it was going to be a moment when things started to escalate. And, it's been getting worse for a long time, but now we're in this point where it's really, really getting worse really, really, really fast. And when you know something's coming, like the only comparison I can make is my parents getting divorced. I knew it was coming for years before it happened, but when it happened, it absolutely uh, dropped me on my ass. Like I was in a bad place for a couple of years after that, right? And that's something I knew that was coming, and I feel it's like the same thing. So I'm on this journey through this pain of awareness of what it means, and I feel devastated. We live in a part of the world where so many of our neighbors are going to suffer so much because they're not going to be able to leave. We can leave, they can't. The infrastructure, their homes, they're not appropriate for what's coming, right? So yeah, I've been sort of floating around in this state of shock and bewilderment. Basically, I'm trying to pull myself together because I like to be light. I am a light-hearted person. I like to have fun, but it's hard to put myself in that space at this moment. It's really, really difficult.
And look, being absolutely honest, I know that I don't help with that because you do the research, and I kind of hold on to this hope that humanity is smart enough to find a way. So when you talk about the future is going to be this, and I'm like, no. Like, we're going to switch on. I mean, if we can put dudes on the moon and if we can do all these amazing things, right, we can come together as a global community, surely to God, and stop this rubbish, right? And I know that doesn't help. So, and I know you wanted to be honest with this broadcast, so I hope I haven't overstepped that a little bit, but I think that's fair to say. It causes tension and pressure here at home.
Yeah,
to a certain extent.
No, but it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. Like when you look at what's going on, it's like we live in a duality where there's this enormous amount of people who are just getting on with everything like it's always going to be the same, and it's not. And I worry for them, when it hits them. But I know that I've been hard to be around for you, but I appreciate you challenge me all the time, which makes me better at trying to communicate what I'm saying. If I'm not making sense in a way that it makes sense to you, then I need to do better at trying to work out how to make it sense. But it's also really hard to be social. Like, when I go out, I can't pretend to that everything's okay because I know it's not okay. So it makes me a bit miserable. And if you ask me a question about the climate, I'm going to talk about it. Although, I go out now trying not to talk about it.
But look, we all get bad news throughout our life. Is it fair to say that you taking this on, it goes so deep? Sometimes when something goes so deep, like an infection, for example, as I found out, if it goes so deep, you can't just laugh it off or give yourself a day off from it or an evening off from it. When something is that, it's like an impending doom, and it's like, I have no right to laugh because I believe this is going to happen, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's hard, right? I watch you go through it. It's horrible.
It's the like, after since my parents' divorce, I think it's the hardest thing I've ever been through. I mean, it's even harder than watching you go through what you've been through in the last 3 months. Being so worried about you, and like, we should all be worried about our loved ones right now because everyone's at risk, because we just don't know what's going to happen next. Well, we do know what's going to happen next, but we've got this sense of safety and security that just doesn't exist anymore. So, yeah, I mean, adaptation's got to be on everyone's lips right now, and that not even that conversation is happening. Preparing our countries, I hear leaders, I listen to politicians. What are they saying? They're not preparing their people. They're not making sure the homes are safe based on the different weathers that are coming through. And but I think I'm going through this time now, and soon everyone will be going through this time. And by the time that happens, hopefully I'll be in a position where I'm strong enough again that I can help guide people through it, because we actually don't have time for people to sit in despair or eco-anxiety. And I don't think I've been going through eco-anxiety. I had that years ago. I think it's something much more deeper and fundamental. It's it's been a harrowing place, but people have been sort of reaching out. What can I do to help? What can I do to help? And really, the only thing you can do to help is to take action and get out there and do something, because I don't need anything else. I can get myself back. I just need people to stop telling me they're listening to me and start actually going out there and doing something about it. So
Proving it, right.
Yeah. And, this
Yeah.
is about our children's future that I'm talking about.
Sure.
And they tell us their dreams, and we're 100% behind their dreams, but will they have the opportunity to live those dreams? And
Yep.
I'm never going to stop
Yep.
trying to make that possible. Yeah.
I know. Look, we have those conversations. The boys talk about their future, and the two of us are like, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But then afterwards, we're kind of like, Jesus, like, we don't know. We just don't know. But it's not our right to take away their dreams.
No.
For the future.
And we've got to keep believing that humanity will get its act together so that we don't take away their dreams. Our kids should be able to go to school and be educated towards a future that they can guarantee for themselves. And we can't guarantee our children's future right now. Our 3 priorities for our kids are to teach them how to fight, how to shoot, and how to grow food. And we're doing all 3 things now because they're going to be skills that they're going to need, right? If we're not preparing our children to be strong and resilient, how are they going to cope?
Right. Yep. So I want to. So this is kind of. It's triggered off another question that I wanted to ask you while we're talking about this. This change in the last 12 months, and I know that we haven't sort of prepared for this one, but I know you won't mind. Over the last 12 months, I've seen this sort of community online referred to as Doomers, and they seem to have gotten your attention. I don't know if it'll go as far as respect or credibility or something. You are the most annoyingly positive person that I've ever met, right? I mean, your default setting is so bloody positive. It just, it's like, how do you do that? So seeing you go and sort of hanging out with folks that are saying, well, we're all screwed because of this, and this. It's a really, it's a huge shift. Tell me why these folks or this community who you choose to give your time and attention to part of the time. I know you spread yourself very thin across all demographics, but tell me why they are sort of like sticking out to you right now.
Yeah, so Doomers definitely speak to me, and I know a lot of people say you shouldn't be in Doom. Like that's a really bad place to be, but actually, I find it the healthiest place of them all. So, like all labels, Doomers fit many categories, and there's some who are expressing themselves with anguish and fear and strong emotions every day. But the Doomers that I'm paying attention to are much more pragmatic. They're just sharing their truth, right? And of where we're going. And, scientists like, I think his name's James Hansen, he thinks we're on track for 10 degrees Celsius. So basically, the cockroaches can survive until 8 degrees warming, right? So he's saying we're on track for 10. Others saying, like, people are still talking about 1.5 in the media. Others are saying we're going to be hitting 3 and 4 in the next couple of decades, right? 1.5 is already catastrophic for organized human society as we know it. So I like them because I don't want to talk nonsense with people. I just want to look at the facts. And I don't think that they're wrong. The only difference between them and I is I don't sit in doom. But at the same time, I don't think they're that these aren't people that have given up. These are just people that are, and they're probably looking around the world and looking at humanity and how humanity responds to even the pandemic, right? How badly we screwed up the pandemic, this arrogance that we think that we can defeat a virus, and we're still looking at the ramifications of that today and will be for the long term. And you look at some of the long COVID studies coming out right now, right? So human arrogance. So, and you look at the physics of the earth and we think, we'll just get a couple of EVs and technology and that's going to get us out of this predicament. No, it's not. We need to revolutionize the way we live, the way we think, the way we build stuff. Like we've got to completely transform it all. So for me, Doomers, they're telling the truth. Look, I'll show you. I'll show you a couple of charts, right? So, okay. This is the emissions chart. So 12,000 years ago was when we came out of the last ice age, right? And you can see the last little flick up. That's when we get past 6 degrees global warming. You see that?
Yep.
Now, when I started looking at those numbers, especially, when you hear them talking about 10 degrees global warming, there's nothing that's really sort of showing what does that look like in this chart. So I found a paleo record. And if you look at it, that's basically the sort of temperatures where a single cell organism thrived, right? So that's what we're putting ourselves at risk of, getting the world warming. So 400 ppm, we're at 425 now. So and all of this warming is escalating. And then you've got this other one, right? This other one, which is Arctic sea ice extinct, right? So we're experiencing terminal shock because the shipping industry has cleaned itself up. So there's all these particles that used to be, these pollution that used to be in the atmosphere that isn't there anymore. So it's not reflecting light back to the atmosphere. So we've got more warming because of this. So by cleaning up the pollution, we're also warming our Earth. So this is where the Arctic sea ice extent is. And when we have a blue ocean event, which means there's no Arctic sea ice left in the summertime, the ocean will absorb all the heat from the sun rather than reflecting it back. So then we're going to get warmer. So this is the sort of stuff that they're sharing. And I personally, I want to know. I want to know those things, as scary as they are, because we've got to really come to terms with what we're facing right now and then get ready to deal with it. And
Right.
we may not succeed, but if we're not looking it in the eye, and I always say you've got to look at stuff in the eye, when then this like when you look around, there's industries like Crocs, those lovely shoes that are back in fashion, just announced that they needed to increase their net zero from 2030 to 2040 because they've acquired some new company. I mean, a plastic shoe company should surely be saying, maybe we don't even have a right to be in business anymore.
I mean, look, the world is not devoid of technology with recycling various types of rubbers and plastics, et cetera, et cetera. So if it can be done on a small scale with no budget, as there is a tiny company not more than 10 k's from here that are melting plastics down and extruding them into making basic stuff. It can be done on that real mum and pop style. It damn well can be done by a PLC. Staying with the online communities, as you answered that question, it spurred another question. Another community that tends to have a large footprint online at the moment are the deniers. How, and it's not their message I want you to talk about, it's their attitude, tactics, and budget. Doomers versus deniers. Doomers, to me, they kind of almost come across as very well read, researched folks speaking from a position of science, technology, et cetera, et cetera. How does that compare with the denier community when it comes to climate change online?
Every now and again, I come across a denier that's intelligent and well thought out, and they've done their work, but it's very, very rare. Most of it, it's just nonsense. And there's like a playlist, and just this week, Rebecca shared an article that the beef industry in the US has released this Masters in Beef, where you can go and basically study the talking points, and they've got this portal where you can get information and research, and basically to stop that whole message around that beef is bad for the environment. Beef is bad for the environment. We need to significantly reduce our meat. Let's just get on with it. But they're all playing by the same playbook. So deniers for me, honestly, I'm not that interested. I'm not interested in talking to people I don't know either, because what's the point? They don't know me. I don't know them.
But sometimes you have no choice, and you know that I am very, very concerned and always have been concerned about your
about the
online
trolls.
security and with the trolls.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time, and it wasn't even really trolling. I remember the first time somebody went after you with what appeared to me to be an over exuberance, and we actually knew this young man. I was having dreams, genuinely having dreams in my subconsciousness of killing this guy. And I probably shouldn't put it out there, but I did, right? Because like it's like, how could you, etc., etc. And so, wind the clock forward now 10 years, and I know you share with me a fraction of the negative, horrible, misogynistic, stupid attention that you get, and it's happened during some of your events live. I happened to be on one where there was a whole army that were going after everybody on the show and everything they were saying, how they looked, so it gives me a lot of heartburn and angst. And if you're listening to this and you're sort of saying, okay, so I think, so I'm going to go back, I'm going to look at some of the stuff that Andrea's put out, and you like what you see, but you're scared of sharing it because of the attention that you're going to get, from these horrible people that are either robots or being paid or are just dickheads. I mean, just
that's the right classification.
Absolute tools, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not looking at the comments in case we're being attacked right now. What would be your advice to someone who says, I'm kind of anxious about getting trolled? Like, what do I do? How do I handle it? How do you help someone through that?
I've had some appalling experiences with trolls, as you know. No one's threatened to rape or murder me yet, which is good. But a lot of people, obviously, especially females, get that sort of attention. Look, I believe that. So now, look, honestly, I don't care. I just seen it all. They used to live in my head for weeks. They used to really upset me, and of course, that's their job, right? But if I let them silence my voice, then they're winning. And I'm just like, no, you're not going to win. So, look, I think generally I don't have as hard a time as a lot of people, especially as a female speaking up about some stuff. I'm very conscious about how I put information out there into the world. I think a lot about it, what I'm saying with what I'm putting out there. So, because, there's no point intentionally attracting enemies to your message. What's the point? You just end up in this cycle of nothingness as far as I'm concerned, because no one's winning. No one wins an argument on social media, but we can't let them win. What's going on Twitter at the moment, that used to be the most incredible place to go for the climate conversation. And it's now it's a pile-on. I remember when you were in surgery for 7 hours, I was on Twitter, just commented briefly on something, and all of a sudden all these morons were talking to me. And I was just like, oh God, at that point in my life, as if I cared what they thought, right? So I know what I do, and I know how much information I read and take on board. I also know how much I challenge myself with the information, and I know that when I believe something, I also need to read anybody who's opposing it so I can keep myself in check. So I know how much I do. So some strange dude out on Twitter talking, I don't know how much they do. I don't even know if they're a real person. They rarely see their name or a photo. I'm me on social media. They're not. So I'm probably more inclined towards active participation within communities where I know everyone now. So if someone in my community wants to challenge something, I'm happy to be challenged if it's a respectful, discussion between the two of us, because I want to be challenged if I'm wrong. And so for me, Charles, please, we need every voice out there. And if everyone speaks up, they just can't go after all of us. They just can't. So we can't let them stop us using our voice. And they are succeeding so much. They're succeeding, and it's not right. We can't allow them to win.
It's like, look over here, and it takes so much time, attention, effort, money, resources, sort of trying to talk over try to trying to be heard over the top of it,
Yeah.
right? Because they're very well financed, it appears, in some cases, on certain topics, and it's like you literally can hardly get a word in edgeways. I have had very limited experience of being trolled. I got into a spat once with someone on LinkedIn, and having zero imagination and creative skills, as you know, I don't have them. The only default setting I had was to say to this guy, I tell you what, mate, post up your address and let's get together in person and kind of sort it out, wink, wink type thing. And I think I finished it off with an emoticon with boxing gloves or something like that.
Yes.
So not the most PC way to deal with it, but I hate it. It's hurtful. It's harmful. We've got 2 teenage boys where, sort of online bullying is almost like, it almost feels like baby trolls start with online bullying. But I know that's probably not the case. We're rapidly approaching sort of the time that we said we were going to try and keep to. So moving forward with hope, as I've said before, you're the most positive person I know, right? And I see you constantly fighting and never giving up, sacrificing a lot, yourself, a lot of your time, a lot of resources. Sometimes I think it's okay for me to say, sometimes sacrificing time that you could be spending with me and the boys and bits and pieces. And we all bought into that. So there's zero criticism on that. But the energy it's taking from you, but it seems so, I'm desperately trying to avoid using the word pointless, right? From all the information and the data that you've got, it seems there's no hope. So where is the hope? What can we do? You got 2 minutes in an elevator with somebody and I'm really interested in climate change. Tell me, what can I do? What can we do? What's your advice?
I hate those 2 minute in an elevator. It's not a 2 minute in an elevator opportunity. This is one of the biggest and most complex things that we've ever faced as a species. And we need to get our heads around the complexity of it, because it is very, very, very complex. And I've gone to the ends of the doom path, I suppose, and seen what it looks like we're going to be facing, and it's not very pretty. So the whole time I'm like, what can we do?
Sorry, before you go on, let me ask you a question. Are you a doomer now?
No.
Okay.
No.
Good. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's all right. There's only one path that I can see forward. It's the only path, and it's when enough of us, and that's got to be 25% of the global population today, quickly escalating up to 50% of the global population today. We all say, right, enough, it's time to act. We need to do everything we can do right now, everything everywhere all at once, as Antonio Guterres, the head of the UN, said. And we need to fight the inevitability of civilization collapse, because that's where we're heading. It's not 2100. We're already on the path to that collapse now, and you can see it. What's going on in Sudan, the famine in the Horn of Africa, the growing food crises, global famine, like all of it. It's all happening now, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse no matter what we do, right? So first of all, we need to have the guts to stand up and say, it's going to get worse, and it may never get better. But maybe it doesn't have to be as bad, and maybe we have a chance. But the only chance is all of us saying we have to stand up. We can no longer be silent. I saw the big one protest in the UK. It attracted so few people, and the people that make me sad are the parents who aren't doing anything, because the children are in such despair for their future. And I feel a bit emotional talking about it. Like, the world's parents, especially in the wealthy countries of the world, we need to do this for our kids. We need to step up, but we have to say no more business as usual. And we can't expect the people who are struggling to afford to eat or to heat their homes or to cool their homes to be the ones on the front line fighting for this. If you are not in that position, then you are a person who has contributed to the problem in the world. So therefore we need to be part of the solution in the world. So we're fighting for our kids' future and their ability to go to school, and we're fighting for some sort of a level of guarantee for our kids that they can have a future, and they're in despair at the collapse of the natural world. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember, and this was before this. This must be 4 or 5 years ago. I remember our youngest fella coming home, so he would have been 9 or 10, about 9 or 10, and I think they'd done something at school, and I think they've been talking about climate change, and then they've also been listening to other bits and pieces, and I remember him saying, if it gets too hot to live, if it gets too hot to go outside, I don't want to live.
Yeah, he said, I'm going to commit suicide. He was 11.
And it was like having, and this was zero. This is before any of this was receiving a poofteenth of the attention it gets right now.
Yeah.
So that was something that he put 2 and 2 together with something at school, and probably with a bit of help from YouTube on the side. But for him to say that, I remember where we were living. I remember where I was standing, and it was like someone had just thrown a bucket of water over me.
Yeah, it was devastating.
Like, it was horrible. So you talk about it making you emotional. It's horrible. It's horrible to think of like that. And we're trying to make decisions. Expect the best, plan for the worst. And we're sort of, we're running our own race on sort of how we think things are going to be, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's hard. And then as your kids get older, so now they're huge and strapping teenagers and all the rest of it. So they're physically able, but they haven't got the 50 plus years of street smarts that we've got. Okay, you kind of grew up here and the rules were here, and you grew up here and your rules were there. So, it's something that sort of plays on my mind. Okay.
The kids. So just sort of going back, we need to act locally, nationally, and globally, and everything, everywhere, all at once. Which I thought was such a great way of putting it. One of the things that we can do is every single person on this planet, no matter where they are, and no matter who they are and what they do and what their social status is, makes a commitment to get the habitat in their area back to where it needs to be. And I think we need to look back 50 years when the real degradation started. Water, nature, we need to rewild, we need to bring back wild animals, sorry, not elephants. Elephants are important. But look, I'll show you one of the charts that, this is the last one I'll show you, but this is one of the best solutions that I think we can all focus on. So individuals, you and I, can be part of, is rewilding the environment where we are right now. They think it's 37% of the solutions, but it's getting 0.3% of the funding, right? So if you just want to take away one thing, bring your community together and go and rewild your community, because if every single town, village, city, everywhere did this, like just from a carbon sucking perspective, can you imagine?
Oh, look, we saw it. We saw it last year when we made it to the UK, and I didn't know what rewilding was. And you were pointing it out, and so after a couple of days, I kind of had to pull the trigger on asking the question. I was trying to figure it out myself, so I didn't look too much of a dullard. For those folks that don't know, rewilding is allocated pieces of land that are just left to rewild.
Not even allocated. Like, if you go on the trains in Holland, all through the tracks, you can see flowers growing. We saw it all over the UK. It was fantastic. It was really inspiring. But the other thing is, while you're getting your community together, and community is a really big part of this, right? Also plant communal gardens and plant food, because a global famine and food shortage is coming. So do this now because it takes time to get a garden going, so those sort of things. We also need to make a commitment that we're going to take care of the poor and make sure that their homes and where they live can cope with the environment that is coming that way, whether it's the deep freezers or the wet bulb temperatures, and not abandon them when the calamity strikes. We need to be talking about what we're doing. Like I'm always talking about it around the beach, doing a beach cleanup, whatever I'm doing, because I'm trying to say, look, trying to inspire other people to do it. So, and when we're all talking about it, we're going to normalize what's going on. A really, really important part of this is, as well as to save your own energy, because when it's not everybody talking about it and you're still trying to get people to talk about it, it takes a lot from you, and I said to Steve last year, my life force is being reduced by being part of this, because I believe in it so strongly. But don't worry about the people that don't agree with you. Don't fight with the people that disagree with you. Don't try and explain to them. If they're not listening, if they don't see what we see, don't worry about them. There's so much negative energy out there in the world at the moment. There's so many people screaming at each other and fighting with each other. I mean, you look at someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's always in a rage. I mean, my God, I can't. That woman, she's crazy. So don't worry about the people that don't agree with you. Look, they change, they don't change. It doesn't matter. We just have to get on without them now. And I think that's a really important thing. And it's also much better for your own sort of peace of mind. And I've seen some people who share what I do, and I can see on Facebook some grumpy old uncle, and I'm sorry, but typically it's older white men who seem to be the ones doing this. They come and attack them, and then if that's your first time going out there sharing something about the environment, and some uncle that has been in your life all your life is the first person that comes in and attacks you, it then takes away your confidence to keep going. Don't worry about them, because they're going to be dead before this really matters, and you're not, and your children aren't. So older people, I think, need to be very conscious of their contribution to the conversation at the moment. It's not saying that they don't have a right to say what they want to say, but when their children or their grandchildren are sitting in despair at their future and they're not contributing in a way that makes those kids feel better, then I think they're doing more harm than they're doing good. So, sorry.
But no, all I was going to say with that comment of the sort of like the older demographic, in their defense, they, just like us, when they were growing up, there was no internet. You got your news from you walked around the corner, or you sent your kids around the corner to get the newspaper, right? So your window into the world was the news that was on TV, which would depend on the channel you watched, and the newspaper you chose to select, which very much depend on who the publishing house was, right?
Yeah.
Younger folks are more internet savvy. Our kids, and sort of anyone 20.
Us. Expats.
No, but what I'm saying is, as we grew up, kids that are growing up with the internet, they are surrounded with options to get information. Yeah. So when younger people go out on their own and find their own information, and they're having that conversation around the family get together at Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, so, well, I've been reading this and this scares me, and I think we're heading for a 1.5 degree warming, not in 10, 15 years time, but like maybe 1 or 2 years time, and grumpy old uncle at the end of the table jumps up. In their defense, their window on the world is that publication that they are probably still buying, and it could be the Daily Mail, Telegraph, Guardian, could be Fox News, God, I hope not. But it could be any of those. So the real skill is pulling them in the right direction and saying, hey, appreciate the institution that you're following is saying this. Have you thought about looking over here?
But if you can't, don't bother, because you're not going to change their mind. America, the majority of Americans still get their news from the broadcast media, which is amazing to me, right? Whereas younger people tend to be mixture of media. If you're relying on one source of media, and the media is doing an appalling job at this, and that's why people are confused. government leaders, media, they're just not talking about it in the right way. So you've got to take on lots and lots of different opinions from lots and lots of different media sources, even if you don't agree with them. Do your kids a favor, do your grandkids a favor, and at least, go out there and look at, basically, we need to build a world where nature's at the center of what we design. There's 4 things we need as human beings to survive. We need air, water, food, and safety, dignity, right? So if you don't have air, you're dead in 3 minutes. If you don't have water, you're dead in 3 days. If you don't have food, you're dead in 3 weeks. And if you don't have safety and dignity, you basically got a miserable life, no matter what, right? Or 99% of people in the world live with polluted air. Our water is polluted everywhere. In the UK, it's full of sewage. Our food, we've got vast areas of the world, not just the Ukraine and Russia because of war, but vast areas of the world have been decimated. Farmers aren't even planting the next round of crops. We need to be looking at, the rice production is going to be down 30%, which will increase all global seeds, not just rice. And of course, rice is it's a primary product of this vast area of the world where 63% of the world population lives. So we've got to look at securing our food supplies. We've got to be open to new ideas. So cell-based meat, the whole fermentation process that they've been talking about. There's so many different things, but going plant-based, being more open to vegetarian. You don't have to get rid of all of your meat. You don't. And but if you can go vegan, great. I can't see it happening in our house, but we're reducing every chance we can get because we want to contribute, right? But we've got to design this world around nature at the core, and it's not. Nature is a resource with no value in our global economic system, so we have to change it. The media has to change. But, I think that if we can all do this, if we can all come together and say, now's the time, wherever I am, I'm going to do everything I can within the community I live within to get this happening. And that ripples out every place that humans live across the globe. Will we succeed? I don't know. And that's the thing. But I'd rather us come together and work together and take care of each other and do the best we can. We might buy ourselves more time. We might give ourselves more chance to adapt. We might give ourselves more time to get the infrastructure needed so that the climate refugees have somewhere to go so they can live in safety and dignity. So we might get there. We might find ourselves at each end of the earth, where that's the only bit of the earth that's livable. All of this is coming at us, and we've got to come together. But right now, what we're doing is our leaders are taking us down this path of separation and division and nationalism and war, and that's absolutely guaranteed disaster. It's guaranteed disaster. That's the path we're on. So I don't know if we can do it. I don't know, but I'd like to see us try.
And you've got some great ideas. And you've got some great ideas that you have researched and verified and all the rest. And the final thing I wanted to touch on is I remember when you published your first blog. I remember it very, very clearly, and I remember it was a real big deal, right? And now I literally lose track of how many bits of content you put up on a daily basis. Research and they're not all yours that you've created. You've researched them, repurposed them, and all the rest of it. The amount of times we will go out and people go, "Oh, hey, I read your piece. I really loved it." And I remember the first few years when that happened, you're like, "Oh, cool." So shoulders up. It's like, "Oh, it's really, really good." Now, when it happens, I have to kind of like hold myself back a little bit because they go, "Oh, I really like your piece." I was going to say, "So why didn't you comment? Why didn't you share? Why didn't you promote it to your communities?" Because that's how we get good messages out. It's not like we're writing letters to people. We've got the internet now that allows us to reach so many people. So how can people help you better in sharing the information that you have? What can people do?
It's it often feels, why do I bother? Just go and look at anywhere I am on social media and what I'm sharing, and you'll see that a very large majority of what I'm sharing doesn't get anything at all, not even a like, right? And it's really important stuff that I'm sharing. But if I put a stupid photo of Freddie, everyone's all over it. So that's a bit hard. Like, and I'm always sort of really ripping myself apart, sort of asking myself, I'm obviously not doing a good enough job, and I need to do better. So but that's hard, and sometimes I want to quit, but I always remind myself what I'm there for. I'm not there for numbers. I'm not there for fame. It's got nothing to do with my ego, right? I'm there to raise awareness about an issue that we all need to start being really focused on, and we need to start moving on, and we need to do everything we can, because what is coming is so frightening that by ignoring it, it's going to be even worse. So it's time. It is time, right? I've seen people share my stuff, as I said earlier, where, the grumpy old uncle gets on and starts attacking the person who I know, which then makes them less inclined to share. I've also had a lot of people who've sort of just disappeared off social media, especially in the last sort of couple of years, because they're in so much despair with life that they just need to step away from it. And I really understand that. But then, I lost my supporters, the people that sort of gave me that dopamine burst that I needed to keep going, right? So not just for me, but for anyone else who's doing the sort of work I'm doing, and a lot of people doing it in a lot of different ways. Do what you can to support them. If you can comment, like every single person I meet face to face talks to me about what I'm doing and what I'm sharing. Every single person. And practically none of them leave a comment on what I do publicly, and they certainly don't share it, right? If you comment on what I'm doing because you believe in what I'm, even if you don't want to share it, right, because you don't want to attract anyone in your community's attention, if you just comment on what I do, the more comments I get, the more the algorithms pick up the content as being popular. So Jennifer Aniston's latest hairstyle, and I love Jennifer Aniston, millions and millions and millions of people are interacting with a photo of her hair. And then I'm saying, hey guys, we need to do everything we can to protect our children's future, and I get nothing. It makes it very difficult to keep going, and it's a big part of the drain I suppose I've been feeling in the last sort of 15 months, because we haven't got any more time. We have to do this. We have to get going. So the people who've been out there as a voice for the world, for the planet, and for animals, all of the activists, everyone who's doing something. There's so many people, like Vicky Keeley's trying to protect the elephants. She's a voice for the fish, the dolphins and tuna up in Japan. She's doing so much work, and it's hard work. I've got my friend Michelle Millet, who's out there every day in this heat, especially in the recent heat, cleaning up beaches, educating communities, showing them how to recycle. There's so many people who are doing so much amazing work, and they need your help. I need your help, because I need to know that what I'm doing is worth it. That's what I need to know.
And that help can be as simple as supporting the content on whatever platform that you have. Like it, comment, at the very least comment, even if it's, hey, scary stuff, go and do your own research, start sharing it with your own communities. And
that's the other thing. The next step is don't just support us, the people who are doing this work now. Become one of these voices. Become an activist, because we need more voices out there. Until we get to a point where that feels like the only thing that people are talking about, we're not moving quickly enough in the right direction. So it's really hard. It's hard, and I could do with some help sometimes.
I know, and it doesn't help when you're actually married to someone who's an absolute social media buffoon as well.
You don't get it, do you?
No, not at all. I'll share stuff and I'll sit there and I'll tie myself up in knots over doing it, and then you go, yeah, but you shared it from here, which means this. I'm like, I just bloody shared it.
I know, and that's the other thing. There are people that just they're The people like you, it just does. It doesn't. You don't have a logical connection with it, and I
But
don't know how to help you have one.
I don't need to, because you do it all for me.
No.
I don't need to research any of this because you do it. Like, seriously. But no, look, in all seriousness, so the message is loud and clear, folks. It's a really, really, really important message that Andrea is talking about. So at least like it, comment on it. If you feel brave, share it, talk about it with folks. Share it
Yeah.
within your own communities and stuff. Please, I'm watching
Yeah.
it. I'm watching it take chunks out of you, and I don't like that. And I
How
don't know
can
if
it
you'll ever.
not?
No, I
But
don't
how
know
can
if
it
you'll ever.
not?
I don't know if you'll ever be the same. I mean, but yeah, but I love your. I love your it's not passion. I love your determination, grit, drive, and all the rest of it. So please, folks, do what you can. Would be my final takeaway that I would like to leave this afternoon.
Yeah. Do something. Stop.
Yep.
Stop listening. Don't sit in fear of what's coming. What's coming is bad. It is bad, but
Mm-hmm.
we need to get ready for it. So the best place to start is just be intentional in how you live your life. You know, one of the places I started was just really looking around our home and what we were using to clean and wash our clothes and the foods that were coming into the house and all of that sort of stuff. We just went through it top to bottom and it wasn't overnight. It was a gradual process. Then we stopped buying clothes. Like Steve and I don't buy each other gifts anymore because we don't. If we need something, we buy it. Really start to being intentional about what you bring into your home and also what goes out of your home. And then broadly, if you're still living a jet set lifestyle, and that's not the future. Maybe you're just having a last hurrah because that time is over. But we need to bring our lives in. We need to shrink our lives, and it's not a negative thing; it's a positive thing. But
Yep. And it doesn't. Uh, we lead by example, and it doesn't mean you have to
yeah,
go out and dress yourself like sort of head to toe in sort of
no,
like vegan clothes and bits and pieces like that. But the important thing is as we do it, if there's kids in your house, they watch what you do and they pick
yeah,
up on it. And so I'd like to finish off on a little bit of a funny story. I don't know if you remember this a few weeks ago. The boys had taken themselves off with a bunch of mates, I think it's to the cinema or something like that. And there's a new fried chicken place that's opened up, which is really good. And they had to drive past it to come home, and we're like, okay, guys, make good choices on what you have for lunch, and don't stop and get chicken. So they come home, and with a bunch of fried chicken. The interesting thing was they were all R2 and another two. They were hopping around from foot to foot, not because they'd been busted in buying chicken, but because they'd loaded it all into a plastic bag in the shop, and they couldn't figure out how to carry it without a plastic bag. And their anxiety was around telling us they bought a plastic bag into the house, not
yeah,
about they completely stomped all over the other suggestions that we'd made. Right? Don't buy the chicken. That was a gimme. But the fact they bought a plastic bag in, and they were like, really sorry. And I mean, we started off talking about the future, and we've got kids 15 and 16, and folks with younger kids, older kids, and all the rest of it. And I think that's what we really need to look towards and try and aim for the power of hope as opposed to the lure of doom, I think.
yeah. But be realistic, and don't be scared to face this if you can. And if you can't face it, find someone you can trust who's willing to face it. Someone like me. But I'm not that person for everyone. But if I'm that person for you, believe us, and then listen when we tell you what needs to be done because
Yeah.
it's time. It's really
Yep.
time. And if we don't get this right, we could all be running for our lives very, very soon, or dying in unbelievable heat, or freezing to death, or being washed away, or the stuff that's coming our way is terrifying, and we don't want to talk about it, but it's coming anyway. So we can prepare for it. And that's what this time, we are in a time where incredible levels of adaptation are required, and we need to get to work, not after it happens. We need to get to work now because we know it's coming, because the scientists have been telling us. So it's time to get to work. So anyway,
Time to start moving. Yep.
Hope it's been useful. And
Yeah. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for inviting me. I always get a real kick when you invite me on, and I hope I haven't let you down or behaved like a buffoon. I don't think so.
God, not at all. Thanks for putting up with me. I will find my light, I promise.
We'll
anyway,
see.
it's good to have you back. All right. See you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.